In my previous life, my younger sister and I were betrothed by our father to the sons of our benefactor. I married Pei Haolun, who was skilled in martial arts, while my younger sister married Jiang Wensuan, who was well-versed in literature. However, after marriage, Pei Haolun was crude and reckless, indulging his barbarian concubines who cruelly skinned my dog. This caused me to develop a heart condition, and I died from severe bleeding during childbirth. My younger sister was lively and active, but Jiang Wensuan placed great emphasis on elaborate rituals and formalities. He disdained her lively and unconventional nature. And after marriage, he spent his days reciting poetry with his cousin. My younger sister was confined to the four walls of the courtyard and eventually died of depression. When I opened my eyes again, my younger sister and I had somehow returned to the time when we were seeking marriage with the Pei and Jiang families. In this life, my younger sister looked at me with anticipation. Sister, in this life, I will marry into the Pei family, and you will marry into the Jiang family. I slapped her on the head. Fool! What are you marrying for? Didn't you learn your lesson from last life? Marriage is a matter of parental decree. Those few words sealed the fate of my younger sister and me. Before giving birth, I heard from Pei Haolun's concubine that my younger sister Song Tingyi had already died. She was 3 years younger than me. She had died before me. The excruciating pain in my lower body intensified. My body was weak, and I was in deep mourning before childbirth. Now, I had no hope left for life. The doctor began shaking his head and sighing. Lady, if you don't push, I fear it won't work. My hope for the child's birth had vanished. Rather than let it suffer a life of torment, I might as well die with me. As my consciousness faded, I faintly saw my father arranging my marriage to the Pei and Jiang families. When my father was young, he had fallen on hard times in Guangzhou and was saved by the wealthy Pei and Jiang families. Even after he married my mother, rose to prominence, and became an imperial merchant, he never forgot his 2 benefactors. So when the sons of the Pei and Jiang families came with the tokens, my father agreed to marry us off to them without hesitation. He didn't consider their character or future prospects, he only wanted to repay their kindness. My younger sister and I wasted 5 years of our lives for this act of gratitude, only to meet a tragic end. As I took my last breath, my mind was filled with resentment and hatred. I hated Pei Haolun, hated Jiang Wensuan, hated my father, and hated everyone who had wronged us. If I could do it all over again, I would never let this so-called act of gratitude ruin my life. But to my surprise, when I opened my eyes again, I had returned to 5 years ago, when the Pei and Jiang families came to ask for our hands in marriage. Sister! I stared blankly at the scene before me. My younger sister's delicate hands, as smooth as jade, waved before my eyes. These were hands I hadn't seen in a long time. After marrying Jiang Wensuan, my younger sister was constantly scolded by him for being improper. Every time she made a mistake, she was punished by having to wash the entire family's clothes. In just 5 years, her fingers had become rough and her finger bones were severely deformed. Sister, did you also reincarnate? I've figured it out. Today is the day when Jiang Wensuan and Pei Haolun came to propose marriage. In this life, you will marry into the Jiang family, and I will marry into the Pei family. This way, they won't dare to treat us badly. I narrowed my eyes and couldn't help but slap her on the head. What are you talking about? Haven't you had enough of marrying into a family in your previous life? My younger sister was stunned by my slap. Tears welled up in her eyes. She suddenly hugged me tightly and burst into tears, sobbing into my neck. Sister, what should we do now? Her cries were filled with despair. When we were bullied and abused, my younger sister and I had gone back to the Song family to seek help countless times. Our father didn't care, and our mother only knew how to cry, telling us to endure it and that it would pass. She had never stood up for us. No one was there to rely on. In this life, we could only depend on ourselves. I helped my younger sister, who was crying so hard she could barely breathe, looking into her eyes with utmost seriousness. Listen. Don't think about anything right now. Just listen to me. Do you remember the small temple on the outskirts of the city? Go find our mother and tell her you've heard of a temple that's very effective for conceiving a son. Take her there. Before you leave, tell her the journey is long and you'll need to bring more servants and guards. No matter what it takes. You must stay with her on the mountain for one night. My mother's greatest regret was that she couldn't give my father a son. Praying for a son had become her obsession. My younger sister stared blankly, not quite understanding what I meant. I squeezed her arm tightly. Do you understand? She winced in pain, her eyes gradually clearing, and nodded firmly. Sister, I understand. In my previous life, the Pei and Jiang families had sent wedding invitations, and they were supposed to arrive today at noon. It was still morning, so I had at least 2 more hours to prepare. 2 hours could accomplish a great deal. I had studied accounting since childhood, and my grandfather had left me many of his businesses. Now I manage dozens of shops and stores. Many people follow me. Among them is a desperate man. His name is Zhang Hao. I rescued him from the frontier. No one knows his background except me. Such a person is like a double-edged sword, if used well. He can harm others, if not, he harms himself. That's why I never trusted him in my previous life. I personally went to his residence. In my previous life, after I married into the Pei family, the shops I managed were taken away by Pei's mother, who claimed I needed to focus on bearing children for the Pei family. She took them under her custody. At the time, I had already sensed something was amiss and secretly dismissed all the loyal servants who had followed me. Zhang Hao was among them, but he insisted on staying. However, Pei Haolun despised him and eventually forced him to leave. I looked at the man before me, bowing his head in submission. He stood 9 feet tall, with a full beard and a muscular build. He looked like he could take on at least 10 of the Song family's servants. Time was of the essence, so I cut to the chase. What I intend to do is treasonous. Zhang Hao, if you swear your loyalty to me, I will ensure you are well provided for in the future. Zhang Hao hesitated for a moment, then bowed even lower. Miss is my benefactor. My life belongs to you. I would follow you into the depths of hell without hesitation. Gratitude, it's so intangible. In this world, how many people truly have a conscience? Everyone has their own motives. I'm a merchant. Merchants don't value emotions. I didn't speak, but instead stared at Zhang Hao. The silence lasted for half an incense stick's worth of time. Zhang Hao suddenly knelt down. Zhang Hao begs the young lady to help find my younger sister. Zhang Hao explained in detail. After serving in the army for 3 years, he returned home to find his mother dead and his sister missing. The neighbors said she had gone to the imperial capital. Since then, he had been searching for his sister. But the more he searched, the more he felt something was wrong. He discovered that his mother had not died of old age, and his sister had not come to the imperial capital of her own free will. The neighbors had deceived him. By the end of his story, Zhang Hao was choking back tears. I stood up and drew the dagger from my waist. I do not know your sister, and I have no clues. But I am willing to swear here that if you do not betray me, I, Song Tingwan, will devote everything I have to find your sister. Until the day I die. Blood dripped from my palm. Swearing with blood is the most sincere oath in the imperial kingdom. The demon god will take the souls of those who break their oath, condemning them to eternal damnation. Zhang Hao stared at me in shock. He banged his head heavily on the ground. I will risk my life for you. If you want someone to risk their life for you, You must be willing to give them your heart and soul. Being given a second chance at life is already a miracle. I won't gamble it away on any accidents. Most of the servants and guards of the Song Mansion had been taken away. I returned to the Song Mansion with Jiang Hao and some loyal servants who had followed me. I found my father outside the courtyard of Lady Feng. Upon seeing me, my father's expression turned cold. The Pei and Jiang families are about to arrive. Why are you dressed like this? He had always treated me this way. I smiled, unconcerned by his cold words. I bowed my head respectfully and said, "Father, your daughter has an urgent matter to discuss with you. It concerns salt." Upon hearing the word salt, my father narrowed his eyes, looked around, and furrowed his brow. Go to my study to discuss it. My father trusted no one. Whenever he discussed important matters, no servants were allowed near his study. Even his most trusted steward was left outside the courtyard. As imperial merchants, the Song family held royal salt permits. However, the taxes were exorbitant, and my father had long wanted to smuggle salt, but had never found a reliable method. He locked the door and impatiently asked, "Listen, Juan, have you found a salt route?" I locked the study door and turned around under his expectant gaze. Unlike my earlier obedience, my eyes were now as cold as ice. I curved my lips slightly and asked softly, "Father, are you planning to marry me and my younger sister off to the Pei and Jiang families?" Hearing my question, my father immediately realized that the salt route was just a pretext. He grabbed the teacup beside him and threw it at me with all his strength. The cup shattered at my feet, staining my skirt. I remained composed, not even flinching, continuing to stare at him. My father flung his sleeves aside. "Marriage is a matter of parental decree. How dare you, a mere girl, interfere? If you have no news of the salt route, return to your room at once and prepare for the wedding. Don't waste any more time." I didn't move, lifting my gaze to look at him. "Father, Pei Haolun is cruel by nature, with a violent temper. Even before marriage, he kept a barbarian concubine. No family in Wangqing would dare to marry their daughter to him. That's why he brought the token to the capital to seek marriage, all for the dowry the Song family would provide. As for Jiang Wensuan, he has a kind face but a poisonous heart, has failed the imperial exams repeatedly, and secretly enjoys torturing others. If he hadn't seen no hope in the exams, he wouldn't have come to ask for marriage." My father's brows furrowed deeply. With every word I spoke, his brows furrowed even deeper. But I knew it wasn't because of the wickedness of Jiang and Pei. His anger was solely because I had disobeyed him. When I finished speaking, he stood up and pointed at me with a fierce expression. "One should repay a drop of kindness with a spring of gratitude. You ungrateful wretch. Even if these two are as you say, it is still our family who owes them. That is your debt to them. It should not be repaid by me or Tingy." My father glared at me. In his world, daughters repaying their father's debts was the most natural thing in the world. As his daughters, we should be grateful to repay such a great debt for him. "You ungrateful daughter." My father flew into a rage, grabbing the bamboo mat from the wall. He raised his hand to strike me, but before he could reach me, Jiang Hao jumped down from the roof and held him back. "Who are you? Song Tingwan. How dare you bring people to my study? Let him go." His face was pressed into the ground by Jiang Hao, twisted and ugly. "Tie him up." The weakness, obedience, and blindness that had crushed me in my previous life, in this moment, they were completely obliterated. My father finally showed a look of fear in his eyes. "Tingwan, what are you doing? Can't we discuss this with your father? If you don't want to marry, let your sister marry instead. Let him go." Woo-woo. I told Jiang how to stay and watch him. I left the study on my own. The steward waiting outside noticed something was wrong when he saw me come out alone. My father suddenly has a headache and asked me to receive the guests. Li, the steward, glanced behind me a few times, hesitating to speak. Miss, should we inform the third young master about the guest? The third young master of the Song family was my younger half-brother. Or should I go find the third young master? Li spoke cautiously, but his mind was already made up. A concubine's son held more weight than me, the eldest daughter of the legitimate wife. I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. Smack. Mr. Li, do you not understand? Mr. Li was stunned by the slap but quickly knelt down upon hearing my words. This servant dares not. I spoke out of turn. Please forgive me, miss. I glanced at him and walked toward the main hall. Pei Haolun and Jiang Wensuan had already arrived. When I entered, the two were engaged in lively conversation. Upon seeing me, they immediately fell silent. My father is unwell and has sent me to greet the two young masters on his behalf. I hope you won't mind. Pei Haolun and Jiang Wensuan waved their hands dismissively. Jiang Wensuan stood up. I have heard that the Song family's young lady is of unparalleled beauty. Seeing you today, it is indeed true. Pei Haolun was not as eloquent as him and clenched his fists anxiously. But he also stood up and said, Jiang brother is correct. Facing their flattery, I tugged at the corner of my mouth. I hear that the two of you have come to the capital with light luggage and without much money. My family has a villa that you can stay in temporarily. Jiang Wensuan and Pei Haolun both looked a bit surprised. In their minds, with the Song family's wealth, they could easily give them 10 villas. But now I was only offering them one. Pei Haolun couldn't help but speak up. Miss Song, the Pei family is your father's benefactor. Hearing this, I covered my face with a handkerchief in a coy manner. Mr. Pei, you're too kind. My father naturally remembers the kindness between the Pei and Jiang families. However, my father is currently unwell. Once he recovers, he will certainly repay you. Please don't worry. Gentlemen. The two exchanged glances, feeling more assured, and agreed. I had the servants take them to an idle courtyard on the outskirts of the capital. I also assigned them servants and attendants. Of course, these people were all sent to monitor their every move. Everyone who harmed me in my previous life will not die easily. The sky was growing dark, and my mother and younger sister should have already arrived at the temple outside the city. There was no way they could return today. Looking at the Song mansion, now half empty of its usual bustle, I felt a pang of sadness. My grandfather taught me to be kind and filial. He also taught me that once the arrow is released, there is no turning back. As the sky grew completely dark, I called Li, the steward, to fetch my younger half-brother, Song Guangyao. My father's study was pitch black. I took out a firelighter and lit a candlestick. A man who had been pampered all his life, bound with ropes for only half a day, was already pale, disheveled, and looked exceptionally weak. Zhang Hao pulled the cloth stuffed in my father's mouth out. I knelt down to look at him. The man who had once ravaged our lives like a storm now seemed like a faint breeze that could vanish at any moment. Song Tingwan, why are you doing this to me? I'm your father. He had no strength left to shout, his weak voice trembling as if he might faint at any moment. In my previous life, I had wanted to ask him why he didn't save me and my younger sister. Ask him if his so-called sense of duty and faith were really more important than our two lives. But seeing him like this, I couldn't bring myself to ask a single word. What was I trying to prove to him? Would he say he had his reasons, and I would believe him and forgive him? Xinghe and I had already died once. His evil wasn't because of us. It was because he was evil by nature. I looked at my father's withered face. I spoke softly. I'm sorry, father. I must live, and you must die. The knife fell, severing his throat. Warm blood sprayed across my face. Shock and fear were forever frozen on my father's face. Jiang Hao withdrew the dagger and handed me a handkerchief. Miss. The blood is dirty. Wipe it off. Suddenly, the study door was pushed open from the outside. Father. What did you need me for? Song Guangyao entered the study and saw me covered in blood. He frowned and pointed at me. Song Tingwan. What have you done? Where is my father? This younger brother of mine had always been like this, showing no respect for his elder sister. With my father's teachings, in his eyes, women were merely tools for the family's benefit. I shifted my body to reveal the pool of blood behind me. His eyes widened in disbelief. Ah, you. He couldn't finish his sentence before collapsing to the ground. Youth is fleeting, one falls asleep and never wakes. Stepping over Song Guangyao's body, I realized that no one in the Song family was innocent. Jiang Hao and I walked out of my father's courtyard. Behind us, flames were rising. Li, the steward, saw us and his eyes widened in shock. Shock and fear intertwined in his eyes. I glanced at him. Li, the steward, would you be willing to work for me in the future? Li, the steward, knelt before me with a thud, his body trembling uncontrollably. This old servant is willing to go through fire and water for the family had. The fire at the Song family's mansion destroyed half the estate. If it weren't for the eldest Miss Song and Li Guanji risking their lives to put out the fire, not even half the estate would have remained. It was a pity that the head of the Song family and his eldest son were burned alive inside the house. When my mother and younger sister rushed back, I was about to faint in front of the coffin. My mother never imagined that in just one day, such a terrible tragedy would befall our family. My husband! How could you leave us like this? We never had a son of our own. She cried with such heartbreaking intensity. She wished she could follow my father in death. Even now, she regretted not having given my father a son. My younger sister, fearing she would break down, comforted her. Mother, you still have us. She must have been too overcome with grief, for she suddenly pushed her younger sister away with a flick of her sleeve. What use are you? You're just useless daughters. Husband, it's my fault for not leaving the Song family an heir. My younger sister looked at our mother in shock. I averted my gaze and continued crying. That's right. My younger sister and I were just useless daughters. So no one would ever suspect me. Though my father had many concubines, he had few sons. Now, aside from us sisters, there was only one younger half-brother, just 6 years old, a 6-year-old child, without the support of his mother's family, was the perfect scapegoat. Many people came to mourn. Pei Haolun and Jiang Wensuan also heard the news. They were stunned. Before my father could repay their kindness, he had already died. However, their panic didn't last long, because my mother saw them looking at them as if they were their own sons, and she was very pleased. In front of everyone, she promised them that although my father was no longer alive, the Song family would never forget his kindness. If it weren't for my father's charred body still lying in the funeral hall, my mother would have forced me and my younger sister to marry them on the spot. The two of them, having gained my mother's approval, cried even more fervently before the coffin. I looked at my younger sister kneeling beside me. She stared intently at Jiang Wensuan, her fingers clenched tightly together. Her eyes were filled with hatred. I gently pulled her hand away and smoothed out the wrinkles in her palm. My father's funeral was held with great pomp and ceremony. Taking advantage of the large crowd at the funeral, I instructed Li, the manager, to invite all the merchants who had frequent dealings with the Song family to gather in one place. With my father dead, the Song family was like a piece of juicy meat in their eyes. If I did nothing, the Song family would eventually be devoured. In the Song family's inn, I sat at the head of the table. Below me, A dozen or so people looked at me with various expressions. Miss Song, what do you mean by gathering us here? The one speaking was Wang, the manager sitting to my left. As fellow imperial merchants, he had always been at odds with my father. Seeing that everyone was present, I took out a handkerchief to wipe the corners of my eyes, feigning weakness. Uncles and managers. My father passed away suddenly, and the Song family has no male heirs to receive guests. I am here on his behalf. Please do not hold it against me. Wang the manager waved his hand dismissively. In the current situation, no one cared whether a woman was meeting with them. They only cared about getting the largest share of the Song family's assets before it collapsed. I took out the promissory notes I had compiled over the past few days. I asked Li, the manager, to distribute them. These were all signed by my father with all of you uncles and elders. Now that my father is gone, I will settle all debts. Upon hearing this, the shopkeepers began to whisper among themselves. Miss Song, are you serious? I smiled, though I am a woman. I keep my word. Upon hearing my confirmation, their voices grew louder. But only a few eyes showed gratitude. Most were filled with greed. My display of weakness only made them think the Song family was easier to bully. Amidst the chaos, my hand holding the teacup suddenly slipped. Clang! The sound of the teacup shattering echoed throughout the hall. The shopkeepers, who had been discussing among themselves, all turned their gaze toward me. I smiled. Sorry. My hand slipped. Wang, the shopkeeper, snorted coldly and slammed the IOU onto the table. Miss Song, my Wang family doesn't need this silver. Your Song family has lost its head, so we certainly won't bully a widow and her orphan. We'll have our servants deliver the silver shortly. Clearly, Wang wasn't buying my gesture of goodwill. The other shopkeepers hesitated upon seeing this. The Wang family was backed by a concubine in the palace. Everyone present gave him face. I stood up. Since I had offered a sweet carrot, I should follow up with a slap. My father has known all of you for over a decade, and our relationship is deep. Though I am still young and inexperienced, I am well aware of your deeds. I raised my hand, and Li the manager immediately distributed the documents. Each document contained evidence of these shopkeepers' misdeeds. Gentlemen, please keep these documents safe. I will not reveal them to anyone. However, if you do not wish for the Song family to continue operating in the capital, then that is another matter. Having evidence is essential for getting things done, and everyone here knows that. They thought my father was dead, and that these documents were burned in the fire. But they didn't know that I had taken them out of my father's study. Wang, the shopkeeper, flew into a rage. Do you think the Song family is so upright and honorable? I shrugged it off and bowed. Yesterday, I met with His Majesty and explained everything my father had done. His Majesty is merciful and will not pursue the matter further. The Song family became imperial merchants not only because of my grandfather's immense wealth but also because my uncle died saving the emperor. Yesterday, I sent most of the Song family's gold and jewels to the palace. Thanks to my uncle's favor, the Song family was spared. Wang, the shopkeeper, said nothing more. He stuffed the documents and promissory notes into his robe. For merchants, friends and enemies are but a single thought apart. Seeing Wang's stance, the others quickly accepted the promissory notes as well. Flattery filled the air. Miss Song truly is a woman who can hold her own against men. If only Mr. Song could see this, he would smile in his grave. Smile in his grave? I curved my lips. If he could see this, he probably wouldn't be smiling anymore. After dealing with the shopkeepers, before I could even catch my breath, a maid rushed in to report. Miss Song, the lady is insisting on going with the master. I didn't panic and followed the maid back to the Song mansion. My father had already been buried. If my mother truly wanted to commit suicide with him, she would have done so already. The Song mansion was shrouded in mourning. As soon as I entered the gate, I heard my mother's wails. A crowd had gathered around an old locust tree in the garden. A white silk ribbon hung from the branches, and my mother stood on a chair beneath the tree, clutching the ribbon and wailing. My younger sister stood there motionless, her cheeks slightly swollen. There were not only servants around, but also Pei Haolun and Jiang Wensuan. When she saw me approach, Sun Lao, who was by my mother's side, hurried forward. "Miss, please try to persuade the lady." Before I could speak, my mother suddenly shouted, "No one can stop me. How pitiful am I? My brother and parents have passed away one after another, and even my husband left me first." I had been clinging to life thinking that at least my daughter's marriage was yet to be settled. But I never imagined my daughter would be so unfilial and disobedient. "Husband, I will follow you now." She finished speaking and tried to slip her neck into the white silk. My younger sister closed her eyes but didn't move. Pei Haolun and Jiang Wensuan hurried forward. "Aunt, please don't do this." It was obvious why my mother was putting on this show. Seeing that my younger sister and I didn't react at all, not even a single word of persuasion, my mother's face turned ugly, and she stopped under the persuasion of Pei Haolun and Jiang Wensuan. Sun Lao was very perceptive and knelt in front of me. "Miss, don't blame this old servant for speaking out of turn. Since the master passed away, the mistress has been crying every day. If it weren't for you and your younger sister, she would have followed the master long ago. Seeing her like this truly breaks my heart." I didn't say a word, not even a glance at Sun Lao, and walked past her toward my mother. Under the locust tree, my mother stood awkwardly stiff in her chair, a white silk scarf around her neck, dared not let it hang loosely. After glancing up and down, I spoke softly. "Mother, did you inquire about he?" My mother didn't expect me to say that and froze for a moment. In an instant, her face turned red and tears began to fall. "Listen, Juan, how could you do this? Husband, I really can't go on living." I looked at her, my voice cold. "If you can't go on living, then die." For a moment, everyone froze, as if in disbelief. My mother blinked. What did you say?" I ignored her and instead dismissed Pei Haolun and Jiang Wensuan. "It's late. Please return." "Gentlemen." Jiang Wensuan stepped forward. "Miss Song, no matter what, you shouldn't speak to your aunt like that. She's already heartbroken. You should comfort her." Before he could finish, my younger sister interrupted him. "Who do you think you are, daring to scold my sister in my own home?" My younger sister stood in front of me like a little lion. How dare you speak to me like that? It's a disgrace to your education. After all these years of studying, you couldn't even pass the imperial exams. What kind of education is that?" My younger sister's words hit Jiang Wensuan right where it hurt. His face twisted, and he took 2 steps forward to confront my younger sister. Just as he was about to reach her, Zhang Hao, who was behind me, suddenly punched him. Jiang Wensuan was a scholar with a weak build. The punch knocked him to the ground. I gave Zhang Hao a nod. "This man has been disrespectful to the second young miss. Have him bound and taken to the county office." Zhang Hao waved his hand, and several burly men emerged from behind him. They quickly bound the unconscious Jiang Wensuan on the ground. Everything happened too fast. By the time my mother reacted, Jiang Wensuan was already being taken away. My mother hurriedly dropped the white silk, got up from the chair, and rushed forward without caring about her dignity to stop them. "What are you doing? He's your father's savior." I had my personal maid support my mother. I smiled at her and said, "Mother, my father is already dead. If you want to repay his kindness, go find him. My mother and Pei Haolun looked utterly devastated. With tears streaming down her face, she asked me angrily, Song Tingwan, have you forgotten the loyalty and filial piety your father taught you? Loyalty and filial piety? That depends on whom one is loyal to and whom one is filial to. My own parents are unworthy of those two words. I waved my hand, and Zhang Hao and the other burly men ignored my mother, dragging Jiang Wensuan away. The remaining men approached Pei Haolun, ready to help him along if he didn't move on his own. Pei Haolun clenched his fists, but in the end, he could only leave in anger. Before he left, my mother called out to him, Dear nephew, rest assured, your aunt will repay your kindness. I'd like to see how my mother plans to repay that kindness. Now that my father is dead, crushing these two people would be as easy as crushing ants. But there's no rush. I've already sent word to Jiang Wensuan's cousin in the countryside. In my previous life, after Jiang Wensuan married my younger sister, didn't he say that his cousin was his true love? How could she be left out now? As for Pei Haolun's evil mother and barbarian concubine, they're already on their way to the capital. Judging by the pace, they should arrive tomorrow. None of them will escape. After that day, my mother fell ill. She had the maids call me 3 times a day. I didn't go once. My younger sister couldn't bear it and went to visit her. My sister is a good person, but she's too soft-hearted. Even someone as soft-hearted as her was enraged by my mother. Sister, do you know what mother made me do? She actually wanted me to go to the county office to plead for Jiang Wensuan's innocence. To take his place in prison. Not only that, but she also said that while our father is still within the 100 days of mourning, you and I must quickly marry into the Pei and Jiang families to bear children for them. Otherwise, she will die of grief. Hearing my younger sister's frantic voice, I lifted my head from the ledger. Die of illness? Has she been taking her medicine? The physician waiting nearby hurriedly replied, The lady has been taking her medicine on time every day. It's just a matter of pent-up emotions. Not too serious. She should recover in a few days. I nodded and flipped through the new ledger brought by Li, the manager. Don't go see her anymore. If she wants to die of illness, let her die. Hearing my words, my younger sister pouted in distress. Sister, is she really our mother? My hand holding the ledger stiffened, looking at my younger sister's distressed face. I dismissed all the servants. My younger sister is different from me. When my mother was pregnant with her, she thought it was a boy. The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. Plus, my mother never conceived again afterward, so her attitude toward my younger sister grew increasingly harsh. She even often muttered in front of my younger sister that she wished she had been a boy. As a result, while my younger sister appeared lively and energetic on the surface, she was actually very sensitive inside. She often blamed herself and, when she felt wronged, would first wonder if it was her fault. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been tormented to death by Jiang Wensuan in her previous life. Many things she doesn't seem to care about on the surface, but they stay stuck in her heart. I took her hand and looked at her seriously. Listen, do you know how your father died? The study caught fire. I shook my head. I killed him. I looked at her shrinking pupils and sighed. My younger sister has never asked me what I did when they went to the temple. She's not stupid, she's just been deceiving herself. Unwilling to believe that I would kill my father. Tingyi, who was it in our previous life that ruined us? My younger sister blinked, her voice trembling. Jiang Wensuan, Pei Haolun, Su Qingqing. I gripped her hand tightly. It was our parents. They didn't care about our lives, letting us be tortured to death. Do you know why they did that? She nodded, then shook her head. I whispered, because they were selfish. Because they didn't love us. Because they were evil people. None of this is because you're a woman. You didn't do anything wrong. One tear after another fell onto my hand. I gently stroked her back. Listen. Promise your older sister that whoever makes you unhappy, you'll make sure they never find happiness again. Jiang Wensuan was released after a few days. With my connections, he suffered greatly in the county office. In just a few days, he had wasted away to skin and bones. After being released, he fell ill and never recovered. His cousin, Su Qingqing, thought she could come to rely on him. But upon arriving, she discovered she had to pay for his care out of her own pocket. In their previous life, they had been deeply in love, their relationship as poetic as a painting, but all of that had been built on the wealth of his younger sister's dowry. In this life, their pride was gone, and their refinement was no more. In just a few short days, they were already hurling insults at each other. The courtyard I had lent them to live in had not been reclaimed. Now, the small courtyard is crammed with two large families. According to the servants in the courtyard, Pei Haolun's barbarian concubine has already argued with Su Qingqing several times over the rooms. Seeing our benefactor suffering, my mother was desperate. But now, everything at home is under my control. She doesn't even have enough money for her own expenses, let alone to subsidize others. She could only turn her attention to my younger sister. But this time even my younger sister refused to comply. After I spoke with my younger sister that day, she finally let go of her resentment. She was no longer swayed by my mother's thoughts. Coincidentally, a new cosmetics shop had just opened, and my younger sister was very interested in it. She volunteered to take charge of managing it. Though the shop isn't large, my younger sister handles everything personally, working tirelessly. Facing my mother's crying and pleading, my younger sister was so tired she yawned and turned to sleep. My mother was completely helpless and secretly took some jewelry to sell. The shopkeepers in the capital all know each other, so the pawnshop dared not accept them without asking. They sent a servant to inquire about them. The servant placed a bag of jewelry in front of me. Mr. Song, should we take these or not? I glanced at them. They were all my mother's gold and silver jewelry. Nothing special, so I told him to take them. After the servant left, I called Zhang Hao, have someone keep an eye on my mother. Once she comes out of the pawn shop, take her silver and money. She was so eager to help others, how could her daughter stand in the way of her kindness? The first time she was robbed, my mother suffered in silence. The second time, she was more cautious and brought her servants along. But even with her servants, they still took everything. She dared not report it to the authorities for fear of me finding out. So she endured it in silence. This time, however, she was truly heartbroken, and the stress caused her to fall ill. In my previous life, when my younger sister and I were bullied, she never got this sick. But even though she was this sick, she still couldn't bear to see her benefactor suffer. She discussed it with Pei Haolun and Jiang Wensuan, planning to secretly poison me and my younger sister during the Song family's banquet a few days later, so we could be married off. When I heard this, I was so angry I laughed. What kind of mother would poison her own daughter for such a worthless favor? Zhang Hao's sister had been spotted in Jiangnan. I hired several skilled individuals to accompany my younger sister in Zhang Hao to find her on the day of the banquet. After all, she is my biological mother, and I did not want my younger sister to face that situation. This banquet was originally meant to express gratitude and inform the people of the capital that the Song family is now led by me. Song Tingwan. Midway through the banquet, a maid accidentally spilled tea on me. The maid knelt on the ground, apologizing repeatedly. I'm so sorry. Let me take you to change your clothes. I smiled slightly and excused myself to the guests at the table before following the maid toward the back courtyard. Seeing no one around, I stopped in my tracks. The maid leading me looked anxious and urged, "Miss, please hurry." I looked at the maid's face, a face I could never forget. Even in my dreams. In my previous life. She had been ruthless. Skinning the dog I had raised for years alive. She even held up the dog's skin and said to me, "Sister, look at this beautiful skin. It would make a perfect hat for Yuan." Seeing that I wasn't speaking, Xing Yuan stepped forward to grab me. I raised my hand and slapped her across the face. Smack. "You worthless thing. What do you think you're doing?" Xing Yuan was stunned by the slap. She cautiously touched her cheek with her hand and felt blood. Ah! Her screams echoed. But before they could fully ring out, she was gagged and knocked unconscious. I pulled out the small knife hidden in my hand. For what she did in my previous life, even 100 cuts wouldn't be enough. She wanted to drug me and make me marry her. So I'll return the favor. But the person should be different. After a stick of incense had burned, my mother arrived at the backyard with a group of people. As she was about to push open the door, she saw me walking past. Her hand froze. Her face filled with disbelief. Her pale face, originally pale from illness, flushed with excitement. "What are you doing here?" I tilted my head, not answering her, but instead asked, "Mother, what are you doing here with all these people?" My mother snapped back to her senses and quickly withdrew her hand. But just then, a sound that made one's face flush and heart race came from inside the house. Everyone present was sharp-witted and immediately understood what was happening. My mother hurriedly waved her hands. "It's nothing. Nothing. Everyone go back and continue eating and drinking." But at this point, the onlookers naturally wanted to gossip about it. Mrs. Sun, the shopkeeper's wife, pulled my mother aside. "Mrs. Song, you just said you were taking us to see something good. Why are you turning back now that we're at the door?" On the other side, Mrs. Zhao also laughed. "That's right. Why would we leave once we've reached the door?" As they pulled and tugged, the door was suddenly pushed open. The scene inside the room came into view. Ah! A scream rang out instantly. And there were even some unmarried girls among the crowd. But even these ladies were so shocked by the scene inside that they couldn't speak. On the large bed inside the room lay 2 naked men and a woman. The woman's face and body were covered in blood. Yet the 2 men seemed oblivious, clinging to her fiercely. My mother suddenly turned to look at me, her trembling fingers pointing at me. She stammered for a moment but couldn't form a complete sentence. I raised an eyebrow and said under her terrified gaze, "These 3 are committing such a vile act in my Song mansion. Bring them to the authorities." "No!" my mother screamed, but she fainted before she could finish her sentence. I waved my hand, signaling the servants to carry her back to her room. "Everyone, please forgive me. My mother has been mentally unstable since my father's passing. I apologize for the disturbance today." Whispers filled the air, but I ignored them, continuing to entertain the guests as if nothing had happened. After the banquet ended, I went to my mother's house. As soon as I entered her courtyard, I was hit by a strong smell of medicine. She had been ill recently and had been struggling with her condition. Today, she must have been so upset that it worsened her illness. When she saw me enter, she had Sun Young help her sit up. Before she could speak, tears began to fall. "Listen, Juan. It was my fault. I shouldn't have schemed against you. It's all my fault." She spoke in between sobs. I remained expressionless. Not even a flicker of emotion crossed my face. Seeing my indifference, my mother grew desperate. "Listen, Juan. Please forgive your mother. I'll never meddle in these matters again. Send someone to bring Pei Haolun and Jiang Wensuan out. After all, they are still the Song family's benefactors. Even at this point, she was still thinking about those two benefactors. I mocked her. Mother, if I told you those two would kill me and my younger sister, would you still consider them benefactors? My mother was startled, then began to cry again. What are you saying? How could they harm you? I laughed sarcastically. I was truly foolish to say such things to her. After all, she had already given me the answer in my previous life. I looked at her one last time, then turned and left. Since you were so kind in the past, go to the outskirts and spend your days with an oil lamp and an ancient Buddha. Pei Haolun, Jiang Wensuan, and Xing Yuan were imprisoned on charges of adultery. Jiang Wensuan was still ill, so I sent a doctor to treat him, ensuring he wouldn't die. The prison guards had countless methods of torture, and with just a bottle of burning alcohol, they could inflict over a dozen tortures on them. I would make sure they lived, and lived on, living in endless suffering with no hope of escape. After Jiang Wensuan's arrest, Su Qingqing had no intention of saving him. Having grown accustomed to luxury in the capital, she now saw no reason to be burdened by her useless cousin. She was already scheming to marry into a wealthy family as a concubine. But before she could act, her face was disfigured by my men. Want to be a concubine or sell yourself to a brothel? Dream on. You claim to be a noble soul? Then you will do the most vulgar work, cleaning latrines and scrubbing toilets, day after day, with no chance of ever escaping your fate. As for Pei Haolun's mother, she is already old and cannot endure hard labor. I thought she must miss her son, so I had her visit Pei Haolun in prison every day. I believe there is nothing more painful than watching one's own son suffer. In the second year after I took over the Song family, my mother passed away. The conditions in the suburbs were harsh, with coarse food and little to drink. She barely managed to survive for a year. When I heard the news, I was discussing business with Mr. Wang, the shopkeeper. In just 1 year, the Song family's business had surpassed its former glory. I dismissed the servant who had come to report the news and continued my discussion with Mr. Wang. Mr. Wang, noticing my expression, asked, "Why the urgency?" I shook my head slightly and smiled at him, saying, "It's nothing. My mother has passed away." Wang Zhonggue fell silent. Having dealt with me for a year, he already knew my nature. He knew that beneath my gentle exterior lay a heart as cruel as a demon. They had even given me a nickname, Devil. I curved my lips into a smile. Devil. I liked that nickname.